Fire!
The good news is that you're here. The bad news is that the age of terrorism has not yet come. It's going to get worse.
Today, I'm at the Precision Shooting Center in Forest, Mississippi, a small town about 45 minutes outside of Jackson. These are members of local churches. They're here to take a class to become certified as armed church security.
Do what you have to do. Move out. Everyone stand up. Pick up your gun. Give me some good shots.
The instructor is Clyde Morgan, a 77-year-old Vietnam veteran who runs the gun range on his family farm.
By being on a church security team, you agree to take human life, to kill somebody. I know what it feels like when your life's not worth a nickel. But by being on this team, that's what you're willing to do.
Caleb, a member of a local church who asked me not to use his last name, is one of the more experienced gun owners in the class.
Hands!
We come from a very conservative background with a lot of very conservative older people who would make the argument God protects his children. I offer a little bit different argument. God protected me by putting a brain between my ears and giving me the ability to defend myself. Not only did he give me a brain, but he also gave me the responsibility to protect people that can't protect themselves.
So you shot 2 people.
2.
All right.
2. And back to 2.
Okay. All right, that's good.
This is Mississippi, okay? A gun is as common as fried catfish and sweet tea. I would rather the good guys have the guns mildly trained than not have them at all.
In 2016, Mississippi passed the Church Protection Act, allowing churches to form their own security teams. The legislation was a response to the mass shooting at a church in Charleston, South Carolina that killed 9, including the pastor. Mississippi was the first to pass a law like this, but Texas was next. Alabama introduced a similar law that passed through their Senate in April. Here in Mississippi, the requirements are vague. At Clyde's range, shooters of all experience levels can get certified as armed church security after a single 8-hour course if they already have an enhanced carry permit.
Be careful, because it only shot 1.
She pulled the trigger. She is not pulling it all the way back.
Yeah, it hangs up. It hung up on me one time. Do you have another gun?
No, I just bought that one.
I've got a spare revolver. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Not everyone I talk to thinks it's a good idea to arm amateurs. I visited Ken Winter, Executive Director of the Mississippi Association of Police Chiefs.
This is a situation where you have enabling legislation that puts together a security team, gives them the authority basically to use deadly force if needed, but the reality, as we know it, is even trained police officers who constantly train on the use of force, use of deadly force, and firearms qualifications, still sometimes make mistakes and make decisions that end up costing somebody, an innocent person, their life. When the shooting starts, you don't know what's going to happen. Frankly, myself, I don't think I'd want to be sitting in a location where individuals who the most mandatory training that they have is an 8-hour course on how to handle a firearm. That's all that's required. I mean, gosh, it takes longer than that to get your driver's license.
We're on our way to speak to a local pastor when we hear the news of a church shooting in Texas.
All right, welcome back. We're continuing to follow breaking news out of Texas. Multiple people have been shot at a church in Sutherland Springs, located east of San Antonio.
27 were left dead, including the gunman, a former U.S. Air Force airman named Devin Patrick Kelly, making the Sutherland Springs shooting the deadliest church shooting in U.S. history.
There's a dead body right there.
As the gunman left the church, Stephen Williford, a nearby resident and firearms instructor, emerged from his home barefoot, armed with his own rifle. Williford shot and wounded Kelly. Following a high-speed car chase, Kelly shot himself in the head and died. The incident reignited the gun debate, with some pointing out that the high rate of gun ownership in the area did not prevent the country's deadliest church shooting, and others arguing it would have been worse had Williford not intervened.
I can only say this: if he didn't have a gun, instead of having 26 dead, he would have had hundreds more dead. So that's the way I feel about it.
Lorenzo Neal, head of the New Bethel AME Church in Jackson, told me he still prefers to keep guns out of the church.
The news that just broke, how does that make you feel as a pastor?
It grieves me to know that a person could come to what's considered a very safe space, a sacred space, commit such a heinous crime. And, of course, go back to the shooting in South Carolina.
Charleston.
In Charleston.
Yeah.
My friend was killed, Pastor Pinkney. I wear these bands. I'm a survivor of gun violence. In 1980, my 25-year-old mother was killed in an act of domestic violence. She was shot 5 times, 3 times in the back, twice in the head. My 18-year-old nephew was killed in a robbery that went bad. Someone was attempting to rob him and his friends. This blue one is for a friend of mine whose son was killed at a mass shooting. Gun violence is the #1 issue that we should consider as a health issue. But we have more lives being lost to gun violence, and we have legislators who are too scared to do anything. And the ones who are doing something are promoting laws and bills that are reinforcing this idea that, oh yeah, we need more protection, we need more protection. No, we don't need, we need common sense.
That night, at his home in the nearby town of Brandon, Clyde gives a slightly different reaction.
Yeah, so I guess we could just start talking about, I guess, what happened today in Texas. How does that make you feel?
Well, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know that anyone does. I know the guns will be blamed, and that's the obvious thing that everyone will key on. But do you have a spare tire and a jack in your car or truck?
Of course.
Why? You want to get out and change a tire?
Well, no, you don't want to, but you might have to.
You might have to.
But the difference with, the problem with that analogy is that I'm not going to hurt anybody if something goes wrong when I'm trying to change my tire, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's the rub.
She's ready.
The only answer I see is you and I are going to have to be able to defend ourselves. And yeah, so some of the wrong guys may get shot. Yeah, right, police do that too. As horrible as one accidental death is, or some tragedy in a church, it pales to insignificance on doing away with guns or restricting our ability to fight with those guns. When we start saying, well, let's outlaw the guns, you know, I talked about the #4 buckshot that I used in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And that's what I chose to fight with, and that's what saved my life. And there it is. You know, where does it stop?
Meanwhile, as a retired law enforcement officer, Ken Winter does not take the burden of accidental deaths lightly.
It's a level of machoism to have a gun.
You know these type of people.
Oh,
You
yeah.
met 'em.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I see them all the time. I see these guys, you know, walking around carrying a gun hanging on their hip just simply because they can. And I often think, I wonder what would happen if somebody challenged you. In a lot of ways, a person carrying a gun who really and truly isn't consistently trained and qualified, it's kind of like what Bear Bryant used to say about throwing a pass in a football game. He says that there's 3 things can happen and 2 of them's bad. So, you know, when you got someone carrying a gun, there's a whole lot of bad things that can happen and very few good things.